Hey everybody, really good to be with you. I want to say a couple things just as we're diving into this thing. First, I want to say just thank you for your courage and your willingness to be people who would let this thing that Jesus called his church. He used a couple of analogies. One of them was the body, and when we just let the body be the body. We let the hand be the hand and the arm be the arm. And when you let other people pray for you, that's you as you're part of the body, letting other people be their part of the body. And we're really grateful for that. We're never bothered when that goes long and there's long lines. We actually celebrate that, just that courage and that acknowledgement. So thank you for that. And for those of you who are constantly available to pray in those environments, thank you for that. Thanks, too, for just being willing to, engage in worship. I mean, this idea of worship through music is all God's idea. It's thousands and thousands of years old. Even in the Old Testament of the Bible, they were banging on things and making noises as part of their celebration to God. And so I'm really grateful for your engagement in that. I'll give you one invitation. If you kind of weigh it out right now and you think, you know what, if I'm honest, I'm probably taking more energy to the Lions game this afternoon in my living room than I did in that worship experience. I just want to let you know we do this again at 11, and you should really come and try it again. And if you don't, and the Lions lose, then it might be on you. I don't know. I don't know. Hey now, touching too close to home for some people. I know. Yep. So no, just kidding. I love being together. I just want to be very honest with you for a second. I love that we're kind of casual. You come as you are. People wear shorts and flip-flops in the summer and all that. I love that. If you wear a suit, that's great too. It's really cool. If you're joining from home, or for those of you joining from Florida and those of you joining from Ohio and Indiana and New York and all of those places, if you got dressed up in a dress or a suit and you're from online at home, that's great too, right? But I just want to acknowledge to you that I feel somewhere... the best way I can describe it is somewhere between naked and vulnerable this morning, okay? Because we are fairly casual or whatever. It is a complete rarity for me, just wiring comfort and everything else, to wear a shirt that doesn't have a collar on a Sunday, okay? It is complete, it's just not normal for me or whatever else. But this shirt is part of time travel for me, okay? This shirt is part of time travel for me. You probably, you might not be able to read it, but it says... I was at Motion Weekend 2024. Okay, I was at Motion Weekend 2024, which is a really incredible, fun-filled, moving weekend for our high school students that happens in 2 weeks. Okay, so clearly I wasn't actually there yet, but somehow through the shirt I am time traveling. I thought it really important for me to get back in the DeLorean and motivated by the power of love to get back in time to tell you that it is a significant, meaningful, really important weekend. If you're a high school student or you're the parent or grandparent of a guardian of a high school student, you really want them to be, you really want to be at this weekend. You can still RSVP for it. You can go to the website and RSVP for that. It'll be, again, tons of fun and lots of laughs and also deeply meaningful and transformative. These kind of weekends and environments for students are really impactful for the whole of our life. Just getting outside of the normal life grind and spaces for 48 hours or so, really meaningful. So I hope that you'll do whatever it takes to kind of get there. I also want to say that all of you on some level have a part of making that happen. You're part of offsetting some of those costs through just normal giving here at Journey. If you're just faithfully giving a tithe, the first 10% of your income and your gifts and everything that comes in, and then an offering, anything beyond that, you're part of that. You're part of that. In doing that. And giving is part of our worship. It's, in fact, far more tangible than what we sing. Honestly, it's fairly easy to just kind of sing some songs. It's a little bit harder to give what we possess. And so if you're a part of it, thank you for that. And I want to just show you one verse to kind of remind us why we do it. Old Testament of the Bible, God said this through the prophet Malachi. He said, God said to a bunch of Israelites, people like us, church people who are in the synagogue all the time, God said, you robbed me. And people are like, of course, we would ask, right? But God, how are we robbing you? Don't you own it all and everything else? And he said, you rob me in the tithes and the offerings. You rob me because you're not giving me your tithes and offerings. You rob me because you're not giving your tithes and offerings. You rob me because you're not giving your first 10% of all that you bring to the storehouse. All you earn, should come first. This 10%, this what they call the storehouse, this imagery of the church and the offerings you're giving beyond that. Your first 10% doesn't go to the waitress, doesn't go to the missionary, doesn't go to the wherever. And God says, you're robbing me by that. And you're like, yeah, but how could we rob God because he actually owns it all? And really what we're getting at, what we've learned over time, is that really we're robbing God of the opportunity to bless us. Anytime we live like outside of what's ordinary for him and his followers, we rob him of the opportunity to bless us. And we're actually in some ways too robbing the people around us. Because here's what I think. I can't prove this. I have no math or science to prove this, okay? I can't prove it. But I'm convinced that if every Jesus follower actually tied to their local church thing, churches would have no debt and items like Motion Weekend would be free all the time. Just like completely, I'm convinced, right? I'm just convinced of it. And that would be part of God's blessing. So just a reminder that it's really core to the heart of God. It is part of how we further our relationship with him, express our trust in him. And so you can give a couple ways. You can give online. It's safe, secure. It's super simple. If you're here in the room, you can give in black, secure boxes. If that's easier for you, there are envelopes there. You can kind of put everything on it and drop it in that box. I am grateful to be part of a generous and giving and grateful church at the same time. So thanks for all of that. We are jumping into next week of this series called Awakening, where we're really just saying, hey, God, in light of your desire to awaken us, your church, in light of your desire to rouse us from any sleep that we've unintentionally fallen into, in light of you wanting to revive an interest, a full interest, revive us being consumed by you and just enamored with you and affectionate towards you and fully trusting of you. Again, awaken us. We need an awakening. We acknowledge that when we don't think we need an awakening, we probably need it most. So we invite you to do an awakening. In order to continue that today, I want to invite you back to Revelation chapter 2. If you were here last week, that's where Revelation chapter 2 is where we are going to be. And then it's the last letter in the New Testament of your Bible, Revelation chapter 2. And inside of there, we're going to look at another basically mini message from Jesus through the Apostle John to a group of people, to one of 7 prominent churches in the known world at the time and where the gospel was moving and having some traction. Jesus delivering these message in which he's trying to reveal himself, really. He's trying to say, let me pull back the curtain on who I am, and so that you'll more clearly see me, which means you'll more clearly see you, which means you'll more clearly see us inside of relationship together. Relationships grow when both parties are seeing each other more and more clearly all the time, right? That's how the relationship actually grows. And so Revelation chapter 2, we're going to look at this second little mini message. And here's how it starts. It says this again, Jesus talking to the Apostle John says, to the angel of the church in Smyrna. I want you to write this. So just a little heads up on Smyrna. Smyrna's great. We talked about Ephesus last week. Smyrna's actually, maybe people thought a little even better, a little more vibrant. Smyrna was really, they took pride in kind of being the first of everything. Like we're kind of the best. We're what everybody wants to be. They really just took some pride in that. They were the forerunners in lots of things. And in the middle of that, there is this development of Jesus followers. And something that's really helpful for you to know is that in a place like Smyrna that's really thriving and growing, and you get these Jesus followers who start emerging, there's some hardship that comes with that for Jesus followers. People don't want Jesus followers messing up with what they think is the good in the world around them, right? But one thing that's really insightful, this is going to matter with what we see in this message from Jesus, is that out of the 7 churches that Jesus gave messages to a couple thousand years ago, Smyrna is the only one that actually in some form still exists today, 2,000 years later, 2,000 plus years later. It's the only one that in some form still exists. Every generation has seen people become followers of Jesus. Now, that only happens because the disciples there are doing what disciples do. They're introducing other people to Jesus, helping them become fully devoted followers of him, and then those people are helping other people meet Jesus and become devoted followers. Right? It's just this chain reaction. It's the only one where you could go and you could generationally trace it all the way back. It's now in a place called Izmir, but same country, same part of the world, same movement. which is crazy to think about. So in this city that prided itself being first and best, this growing movement of Jesus, it stuck. It made a lasting difference. It wasn't fly by night, it wasn't a flash in the pan. It made a lasting difference. It's holding out the message and the person of Jesus. It's pretty incredible, isn't it? It's pretty incredible for 2,000 years. So what would Jesus say to a group of people like that? Like, what would Jesus actually have to say? Well, let's look at it, because here's what he says. He says, these are the words of him, this Jesus, who actually is the first and the last. Now, see, that's very intentional by Jesus. I know you think you're the best at everything here, these people in Smyrna, but I just want you to know, like, I'm the bookends. I'm the bookends. And the words he uses, first and last, he, again, paints him, as he always does, he paints himself as timeless. You think you're best, you think you're going to last, you think you're going to have the final word. I'll reserve that, thank you. I mean, it's just Jesus being very like, hey, to you Jesus followers, it's going to understand that I've got this thing. Who's the first and the last, who died and came to life again. I know your afflictions. I know what's difficult for you. I know where the persecution comes from. I know all about that. I know about that. He said, I know your poverty. Just as an aside, like that's normal for Jesus followers in the first century. In fact, it's probably still normal for a large majority of Jesus followers in the world today, poverty. Poverty. Part of the reason we can get lulled to sleep is because even in our least, we have a lot. And even in our least, we have a lot. Jesus is talking to people who, they have nothing. Listen, in a city that has everything, there shouldn't be poverty, and yet there is. And chief among the people in poverty was these Jesus followers. He says, yeah, you are rich because you have me. Like nobody's shaking the core of you, and that's really more valuable because it's going to last with me as first and last. You're rich. I know about the slander of those who say they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. I just want to let you know that is not what you want your church to be called. That's not what you're looking for. You don't want anybody Googling your church like, oh, yeah, it's the synagogue of Satan. Go there. But what Jesus is saying is, look, I know that even the people who you think should be for you are kind of against you. The people who should be on your side, they're not even really on your side. They're slandering you. They're tearing you down. They don't want you disrupting things. Let's talk about this word afflictions. Let me tell you what it means. Kind of an original Greek, the word that Jesus would have spoke, that John would have written down. It says, it's thlipsis. Just say it. Thlipsis. Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? I know. Yep, all of us. Crushing pressure. Like a large boulder gradually being laid on someone to torture them, slowly crushing and killing them. Jesus is saying, look, I know that you live under immense pressure. I know the slander against you. I know the pressure against you. I know the persecution against you. It is gradually becoming heavier and heavier. I mean, that sounds terrible, doesn't it? We talk a lot about how messed up and broken the world is and everything else. Man, the world in the first century was it was vile and vulgar and horrid. They had very creative ways of killing each other. And this was a real way. This is not an analogy. This is a real way that people in the first century were killed. Let us roll the boulder on you until things begin to break and you can't breathe anymore. Jesus says, I know that's what you feel like. As followers of me in the world that you're in, I know that's what you are feeling like. Now, the great news is Jesus saying, I know what it is. I know what it is. And so it's like, okay, Jesus, then what are you then what are you going to do? Like the comfort is coming, right? I mean, so let's see what Jesus says. We'll go right back to the passage. He says, so don't be afraid of what you are about to suffer. I tell you, the devil will put some of you in prison to test you, and you will suffer persecution for 10 days. Be faithful even to the point of death, and I will give you this victor's crown. He's using an athletic analogy to the competitions they would have the day, but like here's the thing, is like there is this persecution. The devil represents a couple of things. It represents some business things and government things we don't have time to get into. He's like, and you will be thrown into prison 10 days. It's not a literal 10 days. It's just Jesus saying there is an end to it. There is an end. Somewhere there is an end. Why? How do you know there's an end? Because Jesus is first and last. Jesus first and last. So there's going to be an end some way. But let's go back to this. I know your afflictions and your thlipsis, your suffering, and I just want you to know there's more coming. Don't be afraid of the suffering that you did experience and have. I don't want you to be afraid of what you are about to suffer. That is not the encouragement we were looking for, right? I mean, that is not what how many of us in our agony want to cry out to Jesus for deliverance and Jesus say, man, don't fear what's still coming. Whew, that's not what I'm looking for. Now, Jesus understands it, right? Jesus has been there. Before he goes to the cross, he prays to the Father, man, please, let's do another way. And somewhere in that conversation, the Father said something to the effect of, no, this is still the way. Because Jesus said, okay, I'll do it. Not my will, but yours. Don't be afraid of the suffering that is still coming. Here's what I know and you know. In the world in which we live, the pressure's mounting a little bit, isn't it? If you're a Jesus follower today, in the world in which we live, the pressure's mounting a little bit. It feels like there's maybe a little bit more risk. It feels like maybe there's a little more on the line. It feels like maybe your voice isn't as valued as it once was. It feels like that acknowledging you're a follower of Jesus may come at a greater cost than it has in the life that most of us have known in our time on earth. And we got to be careful. I mean, we're not in the midst of like some full-blown persecution like Jesus followers around much of the world still are, even this week. Places that don't get talked about and don't get on the news, there were followers of Jesus killed simply because they were followers of Jesus. But at the same time, it's okay to acknowledge that the pressure is mounting a little bit. It's okay to acknowledge that there's a little more at stake following Jesus. It's okay to acknowledge it's not so culturally acceptable to follow Jesus like it has been for a couple generations. It's okay to acknowledge that. Let me just give you one very surface example. When we moved here 17 years ago to start a journey, there were community environments that I got invited into simply because I was a pastor. People didn't even know me, right? Now there are environments I can't get into simply because I'm a pastor, right? It's changed. In 17 years, it's changed a little bit, right? It's moving. Some of you feel that in your workplace. Some of you feel that in your school. Some of you feel that in your jobs. You have to measure every word a little differently. Some of you feel that in your own family. The conversation isn't as easy as it used to be. It's not as accepted. Some of you, right? It's different. It's okay to acknowledge the pressure is increasing. Is the boulder all the way honest? It's not. Let's not pretend it is. It's not. Let's not over-exaggerate for us. But is the boulder rolling more? It is. It is. And Jesus says, hey, I see that, what you're about to suffer. I'm just telling you, there's more coming. I think part of the awakening for us in this season is to understand and to start to get a plan for being okay for more coming, for more pressure coming. Whatever political party you are for is not going to lessen the coming pressure. It's bigger than that. You don't have the option to just go somewhere else to try to escape it. The pressure is coming. This was the word to Smyrna. It is the word to us. And to get the best glimpse of Jesus, let's not ignore it. Let's not deny it. Let's say that can't possibly be true. Let's take the words of Jesus and say, okay, then what do I do with that? What do we do with that? What do we do with that? Let's talk about it. Jesus actually says it. Let's look right back at this. We'll just highlight something. Don't be afraid. First thing he says is don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of what you're about to suffer. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of what's coming. Don't be afraid of the added pressure. Don't be afraid of your words being measured even more. Don't be afraid of the people who are going to write you off because you're a follower of Jesus. Don't be afraid of the way you're going to get looked at. Don't be afraid of the public pressure you're going to be put under if you're a follower of Jesus. Don't be afraid. Please hear me on this. You got to come all the way with me on this, okay? Don't be afraid of the rights you're going to lose possibly simply because you're a follower of Jesus. Don't be afraid of that. I'm not saying you got to look forward to it. Nobody looks forward to pain, right? Nobody looks forward to pain. People who have been martyred all throughout history, including almost all of the initial 12 disciples of Jesus, they didn't love the pain. They didn't love it, but they weren't afraid. Everybody dreads pain, I hope. It's okay to acknowledge that it's going to be hard. It's okay to acknowledge that it might get more difficult, but you don't have to be afraid, Jesus says. Aren't you just so encouraged already? Aren't you glad you came to church? Some people are like, how fast can we get out of here, right? Listen, I promise there's good. I promise there's good. Don't be afraid. Let's look at something else. Let's go on a little bit further. He said, because he's got a little partner with it. He says, be faithful. Don't be afraid. Instead of being afraid, be faithful. Be faithful even to the point of death, and I'll give you that victor's crown. Be faithful. Just stick with me. I know it's going to be hard, but just stick with me. Remember that I'm the first and the last. I'm going to get the final word. I created you, and I'm in control of eternity. I am before the beginning, and I will be after the end. Be faithful. Now, the question has to be, at least on some level, right? Okay, if there is pressure coming and the pressure is mounting, what do I do with that? How do I live in that? If the pressure is mounting, and maybe one day, what if I do lose my job simply because somebody finds out I'm a Jesus follower? What if I lose my opportunity? What if I lose part of my friend group? What if What if part of my family pushes me away simply because I'm a follower of Jesus? What if? Well, there's a way. There's a way forward. If we take these words of Jesus, like don't be afraid and be faithful, and we look at it in light of Smyrna and their history and the fact that Smyrna still has a church today, right? And yet Jesus said to them, I see the boulder rolling on you. I see the crushing pressure. How do we reconcile that with don't be afraid, be fearful? Let's go. This is the way we could say it. It says that to be fearless and faithful, to do the two things that Jesus said, to be fearless and faithful, live for more than your life and live for things beyond this life. To be fearless and faithful, live for more than your life, live for some other people, live for another generation, live for the cause of Jesus, and live for things beyond this life. Live for things that matter for eternity. Live for things that matter beyond your 70 or 80, or if you're very fortunate, 100 years in this world. Live for things that matter beyond the bank account, the political party, the experiences we have. Enjoy them all, but live for things beyond that. Somehow the people of Smyrna, in the greatest pressure, live for things beyond that. To do the things that Jesus said to do, somewhere we've got to get beyond ourselves so we don't just sit around and fear our own pain or our own loss, but we can be fearless and faithful because we live for more than just our life or our family life, and we live for things beyond this earthly, temporary life. I really like personality profiles, studies. I'm intrigued by trying to understand like what makes us tick, what makes you tick, what makes me tick. I'm fascinated by it. Several years ago, a fairly complex, honestly, personality study or insight mechanism that's actually really, really old. It kind of came back and picked up some traction. It's called the Enneagram, and maybe many of you are Enneagram familiar. Okay, this is a look at the Enneagram, and everybody gets a number, and your numbers are grouped with other numbers, and you got a primary number, and then you got a wing number, and there's all these things. When you're not healthy, you act one way. I mean, it's a fairly complex, but fairly accurate, insightful way to understand your personality and how you're wired. Several years ago, the Enneagram started to kind of get traction back, right? And I'm just going to say, I resisted it at first, wanted nothing to do with it, because all the people that came to talk to me about the Enneagram act like it was the second coming of Jesus. In their mind, in the Bible, we have these gospel accounts, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And some of them, this was like the fifth gospel, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Enneagram. I'm like, it's not that great. It's a tool, and it is a wonderful tool. And early ancient fathers of the faith, there's some connection here. So I get all of that, right? I understand it. So I let that little manic episode of people die down a little bit, and then I began to engage it again. And it's remarkably, remarkably helpful. It's remarkably helpful. If you ever want to look it up, I'm an Enneagram 3. Things need to move forward for me. There's got to be some achievement. Things have to matter. There has to be a purpose, all those things. It's part of the reason we're really devoted to the why here and everything else. And if you want to do something that doesn't have a why, then I don't know why we would do it. Okay, all those kind of things, right? But here's the thing. I started getting into it. I kind of talk about it. Our family starts talking about it. I start talking about people around me. And then what I noticed is that I end up having conversations with lots of different people about it. We'd be talking about something. I'm like, are you Enneagram familiar? Because that's all I can say, Enneagram familiar. I know like 1% of it. I'm not a counselor. I don't understand all of it. Not even close, right? I'm like 1%. I'm good enough to like have a halfway decent conversation about it, right? I'm like, are you Enneagram familiar? No, I'm not. Man, I would just come unloaded. Well, let me tell you the 1% I know. Okay? We start playing it out, and you might be this, it could be this, and you got, what about this, right? It was fascinating because it became really valuable to me, and then I just found myself, I'm talking about it all the time. It was great. It still is a great tool. I still love it. Right? Still have lots of conversations about the Enneagram. Okay? But it's like one example of this life truth, that the best things in life get better when shared. The best things in life get better when shared. I used the Enneagram. I really wanted to use the show The Office because I have a similar experience, but I was really afraid that might offend some of you, and I was already wearing a collarless shirt, so I thought I shouldn't do that twice in the same day. So we went with the Enneagram. Okay, but the best things in life are better when we share. The best things in life are better when we share. Which means this. This is so significant. You have to understand this. In a world and in a culture where the pressure is mounting a little bit, you have to understand this, that as the pressure increases, Jesus gets better to us when we fearlessly and faithfully share him. As the pressure of following Jesus increases, call it persecution, call it being marginalized, call it being pushed out, call it being whatever it is, right? When the pressure increases, Jesus gets better to us when we fearlessly and faithfully share him. Can I say, friends, I have some great moments with Jesus. My life is marked by incredible moments with Jesus. I'm so grateful. I've had really dark seasons where God felt silent and far away, and confusing seasons. I've been all of those, highs, lows, all of it. Can I tell you some of the best times with Jesus? The times that Jesus became better to me, more clear to me, more powerful to me are in moments, even if they were 30-second or 2-minute or 5-minute moments. Some of the best moments with Jesus where he became better to me and I saw him more fully, it's when I was having a Jesus-shaped conversation with somebody who didn't know him. I can have a Jesus-shaped conversation all day long with people who know him, and it's meaningful, and it's helpful. It is iron sharpening iron. It's so valuable. The scriptures talk about it all the time. But Jesus gets better to us. It's why much of the time the persecuted church around the world can tell stories of such depth and intimacy in their relationship with Jesus. It's why they can tell stories of visions and miracles so freely and so naturally. It's because when the pressure got greater, their sharing got more frequent, not less. Right? Like all throughout the New Testament of your Bible, where we often idealize this thing as the church, those Jesus followers are under great pressure. They're watching their fellow followers of Jesus be killed. Right? In Smyrna, there's pressure coming, and somehow Jesus stays great to them and somehow must get better because they somehow keep sharing, because somehow, a couple thousand years later, there's still a church there. And what if part of keeping the movement of Jesus alive is not bemoaning what we're losing, but sharing what we have? What if what adds to our fearlessness and faithfulness is that we share what we have? If Jesus is really good to you, if Jesus is really good to you, if Jesus is really good to you, and he is, what if there was better with him still? What if there was better with him still? And there is. None of us have exhausted the depths of Jesus in this relationship with him. As the pressure increases, what if instead of looking for the escape valve, what if instead of trying to look for a way to release the pressure, what if instead of hoping we could mandate morality that would protect what we think are our comforts, what if we could be involved in messy ministry that includes sharing Jesus more? What if that was part of being fearless and faithful? Because here's the thing, let's just come back to it. To be fearless and faithful, live for more than just your life, our life, this life, other, right? And let's live beyond this life. And pressure mounts. And it's mounting. It's mounting very gradually, by the way, but it's mounting. It's picking up speed, maybe. And the pressure mounts. Like, what if the best antidote is not to hoard, but to share? It's not to quit telling the story, but tell the story more in a fearless and faithful way. Even this week, I want to invite you to think about this. How do you share? How do you share? Who are you available to? How do you share? I don't know exactly what it looks like for you. I honestly don't. I can tell you it's probably person to person. It's probably life on life. It's more likely it's that. It might be with somebody you know well, it might be with a stranger, but it's probably life on life. I want to give you an easy one. I'm just going to give you an easy. I'm just going to give you I'm going to hand us one, okay? In 8 weeks, we're going to celebrate the high point of the year for Jesus followers. In 8 weeks, we're going to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus. There's no greater day. I mean, this is it. This is the one that wins the day, right? Jesus suffers on Good Friday and on Saturday. He experiences death. He goes to the darkest place. He experiences separation from his Father. He beats that. He literally flicks death aside and then mocks Satan and demons. Man, I would have loved to have seen that one firsthand. I would have loved to have seen the taunt, you know? And we're going to celebrate that resurrection and that newness and the hope it gives us for now and the hope it gives us for eternity. We're going to celebrate how Jesus' resurrection makes it possible for us to experience and us to share his life and his kingdom on this earth, even when it feels like the odds are against us. It's 8 weeks away. So here's the invitation and challenge for us. I want to challenge every single one of us. Every single one of us. Bring somebody with you. Bring somebody with you to an environment like this. And let me clarify, bring somebody with you. Don't bring Aunt Myrtle from the church down the street. Okay, that's not what we're talking about. Let's all do whatever it takes to do our very best to bring somebody with us who doesn't yet know Jesus. Let's just try. Why not? Not just throw out an invite, but let's bring them. Let's make whatever adjustment necessary to do it. If you're here and you serve on a team, somebody will trade with you so you can be in the service that's best, or you can tell your person you're serving and they may honor that, right? Just whatever it takes. Can I tell you the greatest, there's the two greatest risks to that, the two greatest risks to us sharing. Great risk number one is that we assume people will say no before we ask. We assume they won't come before we ask. We assume that. And don't you hate it when people assume things about you? Don't you hate that? So don't assume. And number two, is it means for some of us that we will have to make sure the mission of Jesus is greater than our family holiday tradition. It may mean that we have to say, grandma whoever and uncle whoever, whatever, I'm not going to come to brunch at 11 because my friend who doesn't yet know Jesus will come to church with me at 11. And I love you, but on this day, that's more important. I promise I love you, and this is good for us. Right? We might have to just say the mission of Jesus is greater than the family tradition. And that's okay. A lot of you live like that already. You throw caution to the wind when it comes to how am I going to share. And that's great. I love it. We're inspired by you. But that's an easy one, right? Nobody's going to be shocked if you invite them to an Easter service. Right? Nobody's going to be shocked. They might say no, but nobody's going to be shocked. And more people than you think are still open on a day like Easter. Easter and Christmas, right? So let's just all bring one. Because here's the thing, the best things in life get better when shared. And when the pressure mounts to be fearless and faithful, let's just share what we have. Let's be like the people of Smyrna. Let's be like the person of Jesus when he was on the earth. When the pressure mounts, let's share the person we have. And there's always a promise. In every one of these messages of Jesus, there's always a promise. Look at the promise in this one. It's verse 11. Check this out. It says this, whoever has ears to let him hear, really absorb it. Not just let it bounce off the eardrums and through the sound waves, but actually let it soak into their soul. Whoever has ears, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. The one who is victorious will not be hurt at all by the second death. The one who's victorious. That can be you and me. If we'll be fearless and faithful, man, if we'll live for more than ourselves and for things beyond this life, if we'll share what it is we already have, we can be victorious. And they will not be hurt at all by the second death. What does that mean? Everybody's going to die an earthly death, right? I mean, none of us have yet, but we all know people who have. And if the world continues, we're going to. Maybe you get to 105, maybe you get to 110, but there's an end to this life on this earth, right? And when life on this earth ends, there is an element where we will be in the presence of Jesus. And the only question Jesus is going to ask is going to be, did we really know each other? Did we really do life together? Did you really follow my lead? Did we really know each other? We really know each other. And in that moment, if the answer is yes, and if we were fearless and faithful and living with him and for him and sharing him, then we don't have to fear the second death because there isn't one. We just enter into this thing that he called paradise when he was on the cross. He's like, let's go to paradise, right? But if we won't be fearless and faithful and stay attached to him and continue to let him lead and continue to share him, then we do experience this second death, and it's an eternal death. There is a real separation. There is a real hell. She says, I'll give you a promise, man. Just hang in. I'm telling you the pressure's coming. I'm telling you, I'm in it with you. He described himself at the beginning of all this as in the middle of the churches. And live for things beyond this life. You won't be hurt at all by the second death. I mean, isn't that great news? Here's what we learn in that, is that this world can strip away everything you own. Everything you own. But they can't take away life. Take away everything you own. But Jesus is like, yeah, but they can't make you experience a second death. They can't take that away. They can keep rolling the boulder, rolling the boulder, rolling the boulder. It's happening right now in the world for people who are following Jesus. Keep rolling the boulder, rolling the boulder. They can't make you experience a second death. Jesus is like, remember? I'm the first and the last. I will get the first and the last word. I did create you. And I'm going to get the last word, which is you get an option to be with me for eternity if you'll take it. Take it. So with that promise and that hope to be fearless and faithful, then let's live for more than ourselves and for beyond the things of just this life. And the easy start, like the easy move, is let's just think about the resurrection. Let me just finish with this thought. If you've been following Jesus a really long time or even a little bit of time, and you want to experience the resurrection differently, if you want to experience with a little more potency, a little more fire, share it. Bring someone. The best things in life get better when we share. Bring someone.